Good morning, Andrew.
Morning, Gary. How you doing today?
Doing really well. There is a lot to cover, so I'm going to get you to do 2 segments if you don't mind, so we can take our break on time. And the new early signing date, of which I'm not a fan, but nobody consulted me, begins next Wednesday, a week from today, December 20th, and it's going to be a busy time. First of all, how many players do you expect? Do you have a feel for how many players you think will actually sign with Alabama next Wednesday or during the 3-day signing period?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think a lot of the commitments are probably going to go ahead and jump on board. We're going to see, because we're going to see guys that are going to be early enrollees, guys like Semyon Smith and Nadab Joseph, Jalen Armour-Davis, 3 defensive backs that are committed to Alabama, all going to jump on board in January. Going to be early enrollees, so they're going to sign next week. You're going to see Skylar DeLong, the Alabama punter commitment. He's going to sign next week because he's an early enrollee. Of course, Slade Bolden, just won the Louisiana Gatorade Player of the Year this week. Slade's going to enroll in January, so he's going to be signing next week. Of course, there's a few guys that are going to be signing next week that aren't going to be enrolling early. We'll see Cameron Latou, 4-star defensive end, outside linebacker out of Utah. Told me on the site that he plans on signing next week, but he will not enroll until the spring. A few key Alabama targets that Mace Sewell, who's a Rivals 100 offensive tackle out of Utah. Actually, Nick Saban and offensive line coach Brett Key will have a big in-home visit with him today. So we'll see how things go with him, but he is signing next Wednesday. Josh Jobe, 4-star defensive back at prep school this year in Connecticut, but he's going to be enrolling in January, headed to Miami, taking an official visit to Alabama this weekend. I'd really watch out for him because I think there's a very, very good chance that he ends up flipping to Alabama after he takes that official visit this weekend. The thing is, he's not even taking an official visit to Miami. This is going to be his last visit, so I do expect him to flip to Alabama.
Andrew Bone with us, recruiting reporter for Rivals.com, BamaInsider.com. Let's pick back up with Nadab Joseph and Semyon Smith because these are a couple big hits for the Tide.
Yeah, it was 2 huge commitments last week for Alabama. Of course, we felt like those 2 guys were going to jump on board at some point. They were both strong Alabama leans, and getting these guys on campus in January is just huge. With Alabama expected to lose its entire secondary, especially if Minka Fitzpatrick and Ronnie Harrison declare early for the NFL draft, which many people think they will. Alabama's going to lose its entire secondary, and they're going to need some guys to come in and step up and play big roles next season. And Semyon Smith, a big defensive back at 6'2", 195 pounds. I mean, he definitely has the look of an SEC safety. I'm not sure if he'll end up playing corner. I think he can play corner, but I think he could end up. I think he's going to end up playing safety at Alabama. Then Nadab Joseph, another big kid at 6'2", right at about 195 pounds. Worked out at defensive back. Worked out at cornerback during the summer at Alabama's campus. I think it surprised Alabama because they were recruiting him originally as a safety and did really well at cornerback. So I think he'll come in and start out at cornerback for the Tide. And Jalen Armour-Davis, another defensive back, has been committed for a very long time, coming in January. Josh Jobe, who I expect will flip to Alabama. He'll be another early enrollee. So that's 4 defensive backs who would all enroll early at Alabama. So that's going to be absolutely huge for them next season.
A third commitment in the recent days is there aren't a lot of guys that fly under the radar anymore, but I think this young man constitutes that category. Michael Parker, tight end from Westminster Christian Academy in Huntsville. Now, I like his size and athleticism, 6'6", 230. He can really run. And this is a position where Alabama does have a pretty good stockpile of players, so there won't be any pressure on him to come in and play early. But tell me a little bit about Michael Parker, the tight end commitment.
Yeah, I like Michael a lot. I mentioned he's a big kid, 6'6", 230, 235 pounds. Had a great senior season, over 800 yards receiving. And Alabama's been on him for a while. They really liked him during the summer. He participated in both of Alabama's camps during the summer and did really well. And Alabama was wanting to go ahead and offer him back during the summer, but as you mentioned, they do have a stockpile of tight ends right now. We could possibly see one of those tight ends on Alabama's roster, but moving positions. I think Kedrick James is an exceptional talent that we could potentially see on the defensive line, here in the next year. We'll see what happens there, but yeah, I really like Michael Parker. I think he's a really good football player. We'll see what happens at tight end. Alabama was only going to take one tight end in this year's class. They ended up taking Michael Parker. And they still have a really big target out there in Dominic Anderson, top junior college tight end in the country, out of Arizona Western. I still think Alabama's in very good shape with him. Of course, Alabama, I don't think they wanted to be without a tight end in this class. So I think that was a big reason why they went ahead and took Michael Parker. And, if they end up getting two, I think they'll be fine with it. But they haven't slowed down in their recruiting efforts of Dominic Anderson. I think Luke Ford has really kind of always been one of their top two guys on their recruiting board. But I think he'll end up going elsewhere just because I think Alabama's really confident in getting Dominic Anderson, and that would give them two tight ends in this class.
Visiting with Andrew Bone, talking Bama football recruiting. You can follow him on Twitter at Andrew J. Bone, and, of course, at BamaInsider.com. I was discussing Jeremy Pruitt earlier in the program, Bone, and how this, Alabama's got a lot of experience dealing with this. Coaches on their staff getting named head coaches somewhere else. But as a defensive coordinator, they've got to put a plan in place for him to prepare Alabama's defense to play and then also work for Tennessee in putting a staff together and recruiting. How does that affect recruiting? I mean, there's some key guys that he's recruiting for Alabama. That now he is going to be the head coach at Tennessee. How does that work? Is he allowed to recruit those guys for Tennessee? I know I've already read a couple of guys that he was recruiting for Alabama saying, wow, Tennessee now is on my list. Do you know how that works? Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, well, he is no longer recruiting any guys for Alabama. Alabama kind of reassigned assistant coach to Jeremy Pruitt's targets. One of the guys that they've assigned is Derek Ansley, who I consider one of the best recruiting assistants on the staff. I think he's a very good coach. He's kind of taken over Jeremy Pruitt's targets for right now. But yeah, Jeremy Pruitt's been out there offering a lot of top targets, including a lot of guys that have been top targets for Alabama for a long time. We hadn't really seen any of the Alabama commitments come out and say, oh, hey, I just received an offer from Tennessee. And I think that's, Jeremy Pruitt's showing some respect to Nick Saban and Alabama, but he is going after some of Alabama's key targets. And some of the guys that he's been recruiting for Alabama for a long time now. He's recruiting for Tennessee, guys like J.J. Peterson, who's one of the top players in the entire country, Rivals 100 linebacker out of Georgia. Jacob Copeland, 4-star wide receiver out of Pensacola. Andrews Fox, defensive end out of Mobile. Those are three of his key guys that he's been recruiting for a very long time. So now he's recruiting those guys to Tennessee, and we'll probably see some more guys that start popping up. We saw a lot of guys yesterday in the Mobile area that were juniors get offered by Tennessee. So he's hitting a lot of key targets right now. But yeah, he's done recruiting for Alabama. All he's doing right now is getting Alabama prepared for a playoff game against Clemson.
Bone, let's take a look at some guys that Alabama is recruiting and get an update on their status. Let's start with these receivers, because all I've heard is, this is going to be a mega recruiting class for receivers. And you mentioned Slade Bolden already in the fold, and he's going to be a really good player as a slot receiver. But three guys that Alabama has recruited extensively that a lot of people said would wind up in this class: Jalen Waddle, Justin Ross, Jacob Copeland. I'm not so sure. You already mentioned Copeland from Pensacola, a former Florida commitment. Alabama seems to be the leader, but now with Jeremy Pruitt going to Tennessee, he seems to be high on UT. What's the latest on Copeland?
Yeah, I don't know. I hadn't really heard a ton out of him lately since Pruitt took the job at Tennessee, and also since Mullen got the job at Florida. Florida's done a really good job of kind of getting back in with him. He's a former Florida commitment, and a lot of people who follow recruiting remember he was really torn between Alabama and Florida when he committed to Florida back in August, and then started taking visits to Tuscaloosa. It took I think 3 trips to Alabama during the fall, and a lot of people expected him to flip regardless of what was going to happen with Jim McElwain, and then reopened his recruitment, and really everyone kind of assumed that he was just going to Alabama, but then Pruitt ends up leaving and Mullen gets the job, and it seems like Florida's kind of kind of gotten back in with him, and he's got a really good relationship with a lot of the Florida commitments, and I think he may take a visit up to Knoxville and go see Jeremy Pruitt again. And right now, I'd probably lean towards him not joining Alabama's class, but I think Alabama's got a good chance to sign two more elite receivers in this year's recruiting class with Jalen Waddell, who Alabama OC Brian Dable will see today. Nick Saban's already done an in-home visit with him. He was originally going to sign next week on Wednesday, but yesterday came out and said that he's going to hold off, and it looks like he's going to sign in February. There was no plans of enrolling early. He was always kind of enrolling in the spring. So I think Alabama remains in very good shape with him, but Texas A&M really coming on strong with him. I think, I'm not sure what's going to happen, with Texas A&M getting a new head coach in Jimbo Fisher. And Florida State was always one of his favorites. So he always liked Florida State. We've known Jimbo Fisher for a long time, but I still think Alabama's in very good shape with him. And then Justin Ross, number 1 player in Alabama, kind of been a 3-way tie for a long time. I think Clemson may have had the lead for him, but Alabama, Auburn, still very strongly in the mix. I think Alabama's done a really good job during this contact period. Derek Ansley's visited him 3 times already, so Alabama's done a really good job recruiting him, and he's not going to make a decision anytime soon. It looks like he's going to wait until probably signing day to make a decision. But I think it ends up coming down. A lot of people think it's going to come down to Clemson and Auburn. I actually think it'll come down to Clemson and Alabama in the end. Okay,
well, that's encouraging news because although I'm with you on Waddell, I think it could be tough to hold off A&M there with Jimbo Fisher. I want to ask you about the decision to not push for a commitment from Seth Williams. Of course, I'm biased. I've watched him play since his sophomore year. I've watched him play basketball. The wide receiver at Bryant High School, Paul Bryant High School, right here in Tuscaloosa, committed to Auburn. And I think he's a phenomenal athlete. Again, I'm not an evaluator. I don't do this for a living. But how in the world you could have a guy that talented 10 minutes from your campus and not, regardless of who else you're recruiting, not put the full court of pressure on him? I don't understand it. I think it's a mistake. I think it's a miss. And I just want to get your take on Alabama not really pursuing Seth Williams the same way that Auburn did. And now has that ship sailed? Is there any chance they could go back in on Seth Williams, the Auburn commitment, at some point?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the ship has sailed. I think he ends up sticking with Auburn, and I'm not sure if Alabama will really go back after him. Right now I think they're pretty zoned in on Justin Ross. That's kind of their big receiver that they really want in this year's recruiting class. Most of the guys they were going after this year were slot guys, speed guys that they're really wanting to get speed in this year's class. Not really any they weren't really going after big receivers. They signed a couple big guys last year, guys like Jerry Jeudy and Tyrell Shelton. So this year was all about the speed guys, and they're really going after as we mentioned, Jalen Waddell and Jacob Copeland. They got Slade Bolden and Xavier Williams on board, so they already have two wide receiver commitments. The plan was really always to get 3 or 4 guys, and with them focused in on Jalen Waddell and Jacob Copeland and Justin Ross. I think Alabama has felt all along that they could get at least 2 of those guys in this. That's really kind of why they slowed down their recruiting efforts in Seth Williams.
Okay, fair enough. I still think it's a mistake, but that's just my opinion. Quarterback. Always interested in quarterbacks. Emory Jones, a guy that we've been saying he's going to flip to Alabama. First of all, I'm not sure he's going to flip. Secondly, I'll be honest with you, Bo, and again, you know more about it than I do. I'm not sure the guy's a quarterback at the next level. That's just my opinion. Again, I've really liked James Foster a lot the whole time from Sidney Lanier, and I understand maybe Alabama's showing more interest on him. What's the latest in quarterback recruiting?
Well, I think the way they're just waiting on Emory Jones, waiting to see what he ends up doing. I think a lot of people are waiting to see what he ends up doing. Ohio State took a quarterback commitment last week because they didn't want to wait anymore, and they were fine with taking 2 quarterbacks in this class. Alabama's not going to take 2 quarterbacks in this class because I think Alabama will probably take 2 quarterbacks next year, and frankly, they don't need to take 2 quarterbacks. I think he's kind of been at the top of their list for a long time. Ever since Alabama kind of realized that they weren't going to get some other guys like at the top of Alabama's list, Jack Tuttle out of California, being committed to Utah, kind of always been one of Alabama's big time targets that was on their recruiting board early on, but never could really get him on campus for a visit, even though they pressed really hard. I think that Emory really became Alabama's key target during the spring, and they got him to come visit a few times, and now all of a sudden he's become a realistic possibility for them. Alabama's visited him a few times already. I expect another visit from them this week, and we'll see what happens. He's expected to sign next Wednesday, so he's got a big decision to make. He hadn't really said anything that makes anyone think he's going to flip from Ohio State, but with Ohio State going ahead and taking another quarterback commitment, I think they're certainly worried that he may go elsewhere. But Alabama definitely is holding out some hope that he ends up flipping over to them. James Foster, as you mentioned, out of Montgomery, been on Alabama's radar for a very long time. They just never really given him the green light to commit. But now they're really recruiting him pretty hard because Brian Dable has gone and seen him a few times already, and he's playing in the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game this week down in Hattiesburg, and it looks like he'll take an official visit to Alabama in January. So by the time he takes an official visit to Alabama, we'll know the outcome of Emory Jones, if he's committed to Alabama or if he's up in Columbus. So we'll have a pretty good idea where things stand with him. And then, if Alabama doesn't have a quarterback by the time James Foster visits, I think, the full court press will be on for him. And he grew up an Alabama fan. Said his dream was to always play in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So you got a guy that loves Alabama that's, really just kind of waiting to see what happens there.
All right, and I'll be on the broadcast for that Alabama-Mississippi High School All-Star game on Saturday in Hattiesburg. Looking forward to seeing James Foster and a lot of other prospects. All right, we got about a minute left, Bone, but quickly, defensive line recruiting, particularly interior defensive line recruiting. A lot of Bama fans are concerned about it. What's the latest there?
Well, Alabama extended an offer last week to Billy Farrell, 6'3", 330-pound defensive lineman that's really impressive out of Arkansas. I know it's a late offer, but I think that he's really kind of risen up on the recruiting board, so I'd watch out for him. It looks like he's going to take an official visit to Alabama in January. Alabama recently went out and saw Bobby Brown, the Texas A&M commitment. Actually visited him 3 times in the last 3 weeks. So, still some hope there that they can potentially flip him. Tyler Friday, big defensive lineman out of New Jersey, taking an official visit this weekend. Nick Saban had an in-home visit with him last night. So, big time target for them and a big visit for them this weekend. So those are some key interior defensive line recruits that Alabama's going after. And then I need to add Malik Langham out of Lee High School in Huntsville. Got an offer from Alabama last week. Visit Alabama in January. So really keep an eye on Malik Langham.
All right, sounds good, Bone. Tell folks where they can follow all your recruiting information.
Yeah, please follow us at BamaInsider.com. We got a lot of good nuggets every single day. A lot of great stories, and then you can follow me on my Twitter handle at Andrew J. Bone.
Thanks, Bone. Appreciate it, man.